Something strange is happening right now, and it slipped in so quietly that most people never even noticed it. Not society, not culture, and especially not women. For decades, the story was simple, rehearsed, unquestioned. Men can't be happy alone. Men fall apart without companionship. Men need someone to guide them, soften them, motivate them, structure them. Men without women were pictured like unfinished houses, standing but hollow. But the story has changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, not through some revolution or manifesto. It changed in the silence, in the stillness, in the private moments of men who finally had enough. It changed quietly, the way frost creeps across glass. And now, the shift is impossible to ignore. Men are stepping away from relationships, not out of fear, not out of anger, and not out of bitterness. They're stepping away because they discovered something that was never supposed to be part of the equation. Something women never thought men would value more than affection, more than intimacy, more than the idea of being loved. Real, uninterrupted, unnegotiated peace. And that discovery broke the entire narrative in half. For the first time in generations, men are choosing peace over partnership. Men who once bent themselves into impossible shapes just to keep a relationship afloat. Men who tolerated criticism, disrespect, emotional storms, and impossible expectations because they believed that was the cost of being loved. Men who tried harder, apologized more, carried more, absorbed more, because they thought that sacrifice was noble. Those same men are now sitting alone in quiet apartments, breathing evenly for the first time in years. Cooking their own meals, working on their goals, lifting at the gym, cleaning their spaces, playing their games, reading their books, sleeping deeply, and somewhere in the middle of this simple, undisturbed life, they realize something shocking. This feels better than the relationship I was in. It's not a moment of triumph. It's not a moment of revenge. It's a moment of clarity. A moment where a man finally understands that the thing he feared, solitude, was never the enemy. The real enemy was the environment that made him forget who he was. And here's the twist no one prepared for. Men aren't just surviving without women. They're thriving. They're calmer, more focused, more rested, more confident, more themselves. This wasn't supposed to happen. Women always believed that loneliness would break men. That eventually he would crawl back, craving affection, validation, companionship. That biological urges or emotional needs would drag him back into the arms of someone, anyone, just to avoid the emptiness. But loneliness didn't break men. Loneliness healed them. Because modern men aren't lonely. They're rebuilding. Everywhere you look, you can see the confusion forming. Women on TikTok saying, "Where are all the good men?" Women on Instagram asking, "Why don't men want to commit anymore?" Women in podcasts wondering, "Why aren't men trying like they used to?" Meanwhile, the men they're talking about are sitting in their living rooms with a cold drink, watching a show they actually enjoy, in a silence that finally feels like peace instead of punishment. And that is what changed everything. Men discovered that silence is not emptiness. Silence is medicine. It's clarity. It's agency. It's the freedom to breathe without being judged for every breath. It's waking up on a Saturday and doing exactly what you want, without negotiation, without criticism, without being told that your joy is somehow wrong or childish. It's the freedom to exist without being compared to a fantasy man in someone else's imagination. Men didn't walk away because they stopped loving women. They walked away because being alone started to feel safer, healthier, lighter, cleaner, than being with someone who drained them emotionally. And women never imagined this day would come. A world where men choose solitude over stress, peace over pressure, freedom over fear. But it's here. It's happening. And it's only the beginning. The truth women fear more than anything is not that men don't need them. It's that men finally realize they don't need chaos, pressure, or emotional turbulence disguised as love. They finally realize they can build a life that feels whole without leaning on anyone else to complete it. This is the shift no one predicted. The shift that changed men. The shift that redefined relationships. The shift that made millions of men whisper to themselves in the quiet, "I didn't lose anything. I found myself." For years, men carried a weight that had no name. A quiet pressure that lived inside relationships, rarely spoken about, rarely acknowledged, but always felt. It wasn't one catastrophic moment that broke them. It wasn't one betrayal, one argument, or one dramatic explosion. Most men don't walk away because of fire. They walk away because of erosion. Tiny, silent, soul-wearing moments that stack on top of each other until something inside them finally snaps. And the tragedy is that most women never saw it happening. Not because they were cruel, but because society never taught them to see it. Men tolerated more pressure than anyone realizes, not because they were weak, but because they were loyal. They kept trying. They kept adjusting. They kept carrying the emotional and practical workload because they believed relationships demanded it. They believed that if they just worked a little harder, loved a little deeper, apologized a little quicker, the storms would finally calm. But the storms didn't calm. They intensified. Men started noticing a painful pattern in modern relationships. No matter what they did, it was never enough. If he planned something, wrong. If he didn't plan something, uncaring. If he worked too much, emotionally unavailable. If he didn't work enough, unambitious. If he expressed emotion, weak. If he stayed quiet, distant. It didn't matter what he chose. Every path led to criticism. And slowly, painfully, a man begins to understand something that shatters him. He is not being loved. He is being managed. This realization is the true breaking point for many men. Because men don't crumble from big challenges. They never have. A man will face danger, hardship, failure, even heartbreak, and he'll survive. What destroys a man is being treated like he is never good enough for the person he's trying to build a life with. Criticism doesn't motivate a man. It corrodes him. Constant comparison doesn't inspire him. It suffocates him. Nagging doesn't shape him. It shrinks him. A man doesn't need perfection. He needs respect. He needs appreciation. He needs peace. And when those things are absent, love stops feeling like love. It begins to feel like a performance review. Most women never understood this. They believed men shut down because men are emotionally unavailable. But the truth is simpler. Men stop talking when talking becomes a liability. When every word is dissected. When every emotion is misinterpreted. When every attempt to explain himself becomes ammunition used against him later. So he grows quiet. Not because he doesn't care, but because he's tired of defending himself for simply being who he is. He's tired of explaining his decisions. Tired of having his hobbies mocked. Tired of being the emotional punching bag for someone who never learned how to regulate themselves. And then the quiet question forms inside him. Small, subtle, but dangerous. Why am I working so hard to impress someone who doesn't even seem to like me? That question is the spark. The beginning of the shift. The moment a man's spirit starts walking away long before his body does. Because once a man realizes he feels more accepted alone than he ever did in his relationship, he's already gone. Maybe he's still sleeping in the same bed. Maybe he's still paying the bills. Maybe he's still present physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, he's on a different continent. And once he reaches that internal exit, there is no coming back. Women believed men would always stay, no matter how heavy the pressure became. They believed men feared loneliness too much to leave. They believed men would always choose companionship over their own well-being. But that era is over. Modern men have learned the value of peace. They've learned to protect their mental health. They've learned that solitude isn't punishment, it's recovery. A man who spent years walking on eggshells feels something miraculous the first time he is alone. His shoulders drop. His jaw unclenches. His breathing slows. His mind stops spinning. His body remembers what calm feels like. And once a man tastes real peace, pure, quiet, sacred peace, he guards it like treasure. Because for the first time in a long time, he's not being judged. He's not being corrected. He's not being blamed for emotions he didn't cause. He's not being compared to imaginary standards. He's not being stretched thin trying to keep someone else from falling apart. He's just living. And that simple act, existing without pressure, is what made millions of men step away from relationships that drained them. Not because they stopped believing in love, but because they finally started believing in themselves. Women never thought men would choose peace over partnership. Never thought they'd set boundaries. Never thought they'd walk away from disrespect. Never thought they'd stop chasing. But they did. And now the world looks different. Because men finally learned something culture never wanted them to learn. A man's sanity matters. A man's calm matters. A man's peace matters. And once he discovers that truth, he will never let anyone take it from him again. There's a truth modern society refuses to admit, even though men are living it every single day. Men don't leave relationships because they want to be alone. Men leave because, for the first time in their lives, they finally feel peace when they're alone. And once a man feels that kind of peace, everything he thought he wanted begins to shift. For generations, men were told that relationships were the foundation of adulthood, that a man without a partner was incomplete, irresponsible, emotionally stunted. Culture painted solitude as failure, as if a man without a woman beside him was somehow unfinished. But modern men discovered something that turned the entire narrative upside down. Being alone doesn't feel empty. Being with the wrong person does. You can see the revelation unfolding in the small, everyday moments. When a man steps out of a stressful relationship, the silence hits him first. Not the silence of loneliness. The silence of relief. The silence of recovery. The silence that lets a man hear his own thoughts again. Thoughts that were buried under years of criticism, arguments, expectations, and emotional chaos. And suddenly, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Because peace doesn't feel cold. It feels warm. It feels healing. It feels like oxygen after years of living underwater. A man who once walked on eggshells now moves freely in his own space. A man who once apologized for breathing too loud now breathes deeply. A man who once felt guilty for resting now wakes up refreshed. A man who once feared loneliness now fears only one thing: losing this peace he worked so hard to find. And this peace? It shows up in the simplest parts of his day. He wakes up, and no one demands an explanation for why he slept in. He goes to the gym, and no one mocks him or rolls their eyes. He buys something he enjoys, and no one accuses him of being irresponsible. He visits his friends, and it doesn't start a fight. He works late because he wants to, not because he's avoiding anything. He eats what he likes. He watches what he likes. He lives how he likes. And for the first time, his life feels like his. People label this as immaturity. They call men selfish, avoidant, emotionally unavailable. But that's only because they've never understood what it feels like for a man to finally experience mental safety. This isn't laziness. This isn't fear. This isn't regression. This is what happens when a man's nervous system resets after years of emotional exhaustion. He thinks clearer. He sleeps deeper. He earns more. He feels stronger. His ambition wakes up. His discipline returns. His goals stop gathering dust. Men don't level up because they're single. They level up because they're finally not stressed. Peace becomes the fuel that love was supposed to be. And here is the part women never expected. Men aren't afraid of commitment. Men are afraid of losing their peace. Because commitment isn't scary. Chaos is. Disrespect is. Micromanagement is. Unpredictable emotional explosions are. Being blamed for things he didn't do is. Being the only adult in the relationship is. And men realized something brutal but true. A peaceful apartment is better than a stressful home. A quiet evening is better than a loud argument. A simple life is better than constant emotional labor. Being alone is better than being controlled. Women always believed the good men would return. That they would come back once they got lonely, or bored, or tired of cooking for themselves. That eventually, men would crave companionship the same way women often do. But that prediction aged like milk. Because men aren't coming back to chaos. Men aren't coming back to pressure. Men aren't coming back to double standards. Men aren't coming back to relationship dynamics that drain them instead of support them. They finally discovered something society never wanted them to discover. A man becomes the best version of himself in peace. And once he knows that no amount of affection, attention, or seduction can make him trade it away. This is the shift women never saw coming. Men aren't rejecting love, they're rejecting stress. They aren't rejecting commitment, they're rejecting disrespect. They aren't rejecting women, they're rejecting the emotional cost of being with the wrong one. Peace gives men what modern relationships rarely do: focus, energy, stability, clarity, strength, self-respect. And that is why the world feels different now. Men have choices they never realized they had. They can build, grow, travel, rest, thrive, and succeed alone. And more importantly, they now understand this truth. A man doesn't need a relationship to be fulfilled. He needs peace. And he will only let someone into his life if they protect that peace, not destroy it. A relationship must now compete with the calm he creates on his own. And that, more than anything, terrifies the people who depended on his fear of being alone. There is a moment in a man's life that arrives quietly, almost invisibly, like a shadow slipping beneath a door. A moment he never expects, yet once it appears, it changes everything about how he sees love, relationships, and himself. It doesn't happen during an argument. It doesn't happen during a breakup. It doesn't even happen during heartbreak. It happens in peace. Maybe it's during a silent morning when the sun hits the room just right and nothing is demanded of him. Maybe it's during a night on the couch where his thoughts feel like his own again. Maybe it's when he walks through his home and realizes there is no tension in his shoulders, no voice criticizing him, no emotional storm brewing in the next room. It's the moment he inhales and thinks, "I'm okay. I'm better." For years, men were conditioned to believe that being alone was the worst fate a man could face. Society treated solitude like failure. Friends joked about loneliness like it was a curse. Women insisted that men needed them to function, to feel complete, to stay emotionally balanced. But men eventually got their solitude. Not the temporary version, real solitude. The kind where he finally has enough time, space, and quiet to hear his own heartbeat again. And instead of falling apart, something shocking happened. He stabilized. He healed. He grew. He remembered who he was. Because the truth is simple. Men don't fear being alone. They fear being drained. They fear becoming a shadow of themselves. They fear losing their peace. They fear being trapped in a life where they're never enough and always wrong. So when a man finds himself alone, truly alone, he discovers things he forgot about. His own preferences. His own rhythm. His own ambitions. His own identity. All the pieces of himself that were buried under emotional labor, unrealistic expectations, and constant pressure begin to rise back to the surface. And slowly he realizes something profound. He didn't lose a relationship. He lost a burden. That's when the transformation begins. He walks into his place and for the first time, it feels like home. He cooks dinner exactly how he likes it. He sleeps deeply, no tension, no arguments echoing in his mind. He spends his money without fear of being judged. He works without guilt. He laughs at things he genuinely finds funny. He breathes easier, thinks clearer, stands taller. His spirit feels lighter. His mind feels sharper. His life feels like it belongs to him again. And once a man feels this freedom, dragging him back into a stressful relationship becomes nearly impossible. This is the truth many women never expected. Men aren't returning to relationships out of desperation anymore. They're not coming back because they need someone. They're not forcing themselves into partnerships for validation or security. Men now have one requirement. A relationship must offer more peace than his solitude. If it doesn't, he won't choose it. He won't fight for it. He won't suffer for it. He won't sacrifice himself to keep it. The bar has risen, and it's not coming back down. Men today care more about mental health than relationship status. More about respect than romance. More about freedom than validation. More about calm than companionship. This is what unsettles many women, not because they're bad, but because they were raised to believe men would always need them more than women needed men. They were taught that men were emotionally dependent, relationship hungry, incomplete without a partner. But that was a myth. Men were never afraid of being alone. They were afraid of being in relationships that felt like chaos. Now that they've tasted clarity, silence, stillness, and self-respect, they are not interested in going back to the old script. Women believed men would always return. But the men who were once taken for granted have boundaries now. The men who were once criticized now protect their peace. The men who were once ignored now choose themselves. The men who were once desperate now walk away with ease. And here is the most uncomfortable truth of all. Women never believed men could be happier alone. But men are. And it's terrifying because it means the old power dynamic is gone. The old assumptions no longer work. The old leverage has disappeared. Men aren't afraid of loneliness anymore. They're afraid of losing themselves. And once a man knows that he can build a life that feels full, calm, steady, and meaningful on his own, he will never again settle for a relationship that costs him his peace. He doesn't hate love. He doesn't hate women. He doesn't hate intimacy. He simply refuses to suffer for it. The truth women fear more than anything is this. Men discovered they don't need a relationship to be whole. They only need one to be better than the life they already built alone. And that revelation changed men forever.